and starts kicking doors down. That's the point you're standing in right now. The moment where people who once acted like they didn't need you suddenly want a full investigation, a confession, and a TED Talk explaining why their world is falling apart. And the funniest part? They're not looking for the truth out of love or concern. No, they're looking for it because your absence is exposing things their ego can't keep hidden anymore. Psychologists have actually found that people fear being found out more than they fear being wrong. And that's exactly why they're begging someone, anyone, to come tell you the truth. Not your truth, their version. The version that makes them look like a misunderstood saint, not the architect of their own chaos. Your growth is making them sweat. Your peace is making them paranoid. Your silence, the same silence they once mocked, now feels like someone pulled the batteries out of their control panel. They wish they could rewind time, not because they miss you, but because they miss the version of themselves they looked like when you were standing beside them. Now they want explanations, clarity, closure, a meeting, an apology circle, all the things they never offered you. They want someone to talk to you on their behalf because they can't face the consequences of their own behavior. It's funny how people become philosophers when their comfort is threatened. Suddenly they want to discuss, revisit, reevaluate, and reconsider. Someone even says, "Let's all sit down and sort this out," like you're supposed to be the customer service desk for their damaged self-image. But here's the twist nobody warned them about. Nothing can save them from the truth they created. Not a friend, not a middleman, not a long message, not a rehearsed apology. They're not praying for peace. They're praying for protection from the story finally catching up with them. And tonight, we're talking about exactly that. The moment the chosen ones stop explaining, and the world starts revealing what people hoped you'd never see. Number one, they want you to speak because your absence exposes their guilt. When people start begging for the truth, they're rarely asking because they want clarity. They're asking because something inside them has been disturbed, and your silence is the trigger. Your absence is not quiet to them. It's loud, uncomfortable, and revealing. It forces them to confront themselves, and that's exactly what they've spent years avoiding. The moment you stop explaining, they realize how many explanations they actually needed to give. Suddenly, every unfinished conversation becomes a mirror reflecting their behavior, and that guilt begins to multiply in places they thought were safely hidden. Your absence turns into a spotlight, not because you intended it, but because they know what they did when no one was watching. They know the roles they played, the things they said, and the way they treated you when they believed you had no other options. They wanted you to speak only when it made them comfortable. They wanted you to stay quiet when the truth didn't serve their narrative. But now, with you gone, the truth has no leash. That's what terrifies them. People who have nothing to hide never panic about silence. It's only the guilty ones who start digging for explanations the moment you stop talking. They want you to speak so they can shape your words, twist your meaning, and soften their own image. If you speak, they get the chance to challenge you or redirect the blame. But when you stay silent, they're stuck alone with their conscience, and for some people, that's the most dangerous room they could be left in. They fear what your silence implies. They fear what you might eventually say. They fear what you've already understood. Your absence exposes the truth they were hoping would stay buried. It forces them to see themselves without the comfort of denial. And deep down, they know it isn't your voice that threatens them. It's what your silence confirms. Number two, they beg for answers. Because they can't live with the version of themselves you've seen. When someone who once treated you carelessly suddenly wants explanations, it's not about you at all. It's about the panic rising inside them. You saw something they never planned to show. Maybe it was their insecurity, maybe their selfishness, maybe their lack of emotional honesty. Whatever it was, it broke the illusion they worked so hard to maintain. And now they can't stand living with the version of themselves that you witnessed without filters, without performance, without the mask they wear for everyone else. It's easy to act decent when people only see the highlight reel. It's easy to look loyal when no one is checking the deleted scenes. But when someone has seen the real cuts, the impatience, the disrespect, the half-truths, the excuses, the way they only show up when it benefits them, that person stops being impressed, and that enrages people more than you'd expect. Not because they miss you, but because they miss being admired by you. They miss being believed in. They miss being seen as better than they actually behave. So they ask for the truth, but it's not your truth they're after. They want reassurance that their worst moment wasn't seen. They want absolution without accountability. They want you to tell them that what you saw wasn't really what it was. They want to rewrite their own character through your lips because they can't rewrite it alone. The uncomfortable part for them is this: you can't unsee honesty. You can't forget a pattern just because someone suddenly wants to talk nicely. You can't pretend that the cracks you saw were just shadows, and they know that. That's why their tone becomes urgent. Their messages get longer. Their excuses get louder. They're not chasing closure. They're chasing a version of themselves that never existed outside their imagination. Your silence destroys that fantasy without saying a word. It forces them to sit with the truth they created through their actions. And that is something most people can't handle for even 5 minutes, let alone a lifetime. In the end, their desperation isn't about understanding you. It's about escaping the discomfort of understanding themselves. And no explanation you give will ever save them from that. Number 3, they want you back because you were their moral alibi. Some people don't hold on to you because they love you. They hold on because you make them look like someone worth loving. Your presence acts like a stamp of credibility on their character. When you stand beside them, they seem kinder, wiser, more grounded, more trustworthy than they actually behave. And when you walk away, that illusion collapses faster than they can patch it with excuses. They want you back not to repair the bond, but to repair their reputation in their own mind and in the minds of others. You were their moral alibi, the silent proof that, hey, I can't be that bad, someone like them stayed with me. When you leave, it exposes something they can't afford to admit, even to themselves. Maybe the problem wasn't you. Maybe it was them all along. This is why they suddenly get dramatic when you stop engaging. They write long messages. They pull friends into the conversation. They invent misunderstandings. They apologize without really apologizing. What they're actually fighting to preserve is not the relationship. It's the story they've been telling about who they are. And you're the one person who saw through it. When you were there, you absorbed their rough edges without making a public scene. You gave them chances, you gave them grace, you gave them time. And they interpreted that kindness as validation. They thought it meant they were improving or worth fighting for when, in truth, it meant you were patient and perceptive. When you stop giving them that moral cover, they feel naked, not emotionally, socially, identity-wise. People like that can't stand being seen for what they actually do when no one is applauding. They can't stand being confronted, even indirectly, with their own inconsistency. Your exit forces a reckoning they've been dodging since day one. So they beg for you to come back because your presence restores a version of them they wish were real. They aren't chasing love or companionship. They're chasing relevance, validation, and a clean conscience they never earned. The truth is simple. When someone needs you to stay in order to look good, they were never good to begin with. And no amount of begging changes that. When you stop being their moral alibi, you stop being their responsibility. And that is exactly what scares them the most. Number 4, they need you to explain yourself so they can feel like the victim. When someone demands that you speak, justify, or clear the air, it's rarely about understanding. It's about rewriting the story so they can slip back into the role they're most comfortable playing. The victim. If you explain yourself, they get something to twist, something to dispute, something to turn against you, until suddenly you're the one apologizing for feeling hurt, for leaving, for protecting yourself. That's the game. Not truth, not closure, but control. People who can't sit with responsibility will do anything to dodge it. They'll frame your boundaries as coldness, your silence as hostility, your growth as rejection. They'll take a sentence and stretch it until it snaps back on you like a rubber band. They want you to talk because talking gives them ammunition they can't get when you're quiet. When you stay silent, they are left alone with their own choices, and that is terrifying to someone who has built their identity on deflection. Silence forces honesty. Silence forces accountability. Silence forces them to confront the fact that no one is coming to save them from themselves. The moment you start explaining, they breathe again, because now it's a debate, not a confession. Now it's two sides, not one truth. Now they can cry, gesture, appeal to sympathy, rewrite, rephrase, and repackage their behavior until it looks almost understandable, almost forgivable, almost like they didn't cause the very pain they're now performing. But you leaving and refusing to perform for them destroys the performance entirely. Without your voice, they can't sculpt a narrative that paints them as misunderstood or mistreated. Without your participation, their script collapses. And that collapse is exactly what they're unwilling to face. What they want is not understanding. They want absolution without change. What they want is not clarity. They want comfort. What they want is not truth. They want a storyline where they can feel righteous even when their actions say otherwise. When you stop explaining, you stop feeding a cycle that was never meant to heal anything. You stop giving them a stage on which to rewrite their own mistakes as someone else's fault. And that is why they beg. Not because they want the truth, because they can't survive it. Number 5, they're not seeking closure, they're seeking control. When someone insists that you owe them closure, what they're really saying is that they can't stand losing control of the story. Closure is a comforting word, but it's usually a mask. What they want is not peace, it's power. They want to pull you back into a conversation where they can shape the meaning, soften the impact, or shift the blame until they no longer have to sit with the consequences of their own actions. Closure is something you give yourself, not something someone demands from you like it's a receipt after a bad purchase. But when people can't accept that a situation is over, they invent this moral obligation because it keeps you orbiting them just long enough for them to breathe again. As long as you're talking, explaining, responding, you're still on their chessboard and they're still moving pieces. They pretend it's about understanding, but it's really about resetting the emotional balance back in their favor. They want to hear your reasons not because they respect them, but because they want to dissect them, minimize them, and convince themselves they were never really at fault. In their mind, closure isn't an ending. It's a negotiation where they try to walk away feeling like they didn't do that bad. When you refuse to play, they panic. Not because they miss you, but because they miss influence. When you stop answering, they can't redirect the conversation, can't rewrite the timeline, can't present themselves as the wounded party in need of understanding. Silence cuts off their favorite tool, the ability to control how their behavior is interpreted. People who chase closure often want a final scene where they can perform remorse without committing to change, where they can say, "I get it now," without actually getting it, where they can feel like they've done something meaningful without doing anything different. But closure isn't a performance, and it isn't something you hand out to calm someone else's anxiety. Closure is truth meeting acceptance, and acceptance can't be forced, and it can't be negotiated.